The question for this problem says, which choice best states the function of the underlined sentence in the overall structure of the text? So basically, when we're reading, we need to find what is the relationship between the underlined sentence. We're trying to find the relationship. So as we're reading, we need to think of that. So the text says, a study by a team, including the finance professor Madhu Veeraraghavan, suggests that exposure to sunshine during the workday can lead to overly optimistic behavior. Using data spanning from 1994 to 2010 for a set of U.S. companies, the team compared over 29,000 annual earnings forecast to the actual earnings later reported by those companies. The team found that the greater exposure to sunshine at work in the 2 weeks before a manager submitted an earnings forecast, the more the manager's forecast exceeded what the company actually earned that year. So we can we can look at each sentence. What does the first say? The first basically says, it's like kind of presents the studies, presents the hypothesis, we could say, because it's basically saying a study suggests that exposure, this is a hypothesis essentially, it's like implying this, exposure to sunshine during the workday can lead to overly optimistic behavior. So it's presenting the hypothesis. Then the second sentence essentially describes the data. It describes the data. We can see it uses specific data like 1994 to 2010, and the team compared over 29,000 annual earnings for the forecast. So it's describing the data, and it's really how was data used and how was data used. So then the third essentially is presenting the findings. So this is a lot almost like a scientific experiment. So it's presenting the findings. We can see this because it's saying they found the greatest they found. So this is like the findings, and they're showing what they found. They became a manager. Basically the finding was more managers' forecast exceed what the company actually earned if they're optimistic. So based on that, I kind of get an idea that the relationship is this second one is really helping to explain the procedure or how they're doing things. So let's look through the answers. So A says to summarize the results of the team's analysis. For an answer to be correct, every part of the answer needs to be correct. So that means to the results, it needs to summarize and it needs to show the results. So those are the two important elements. And we can look, does it really summarize? Summary is often very vague, but it uses specific examples like 29,000 and 1994 to 2010. So I would disagree that it's a summary. We can move off of that, but we can also see the results. It's not really showing us the results. It's kind of the third sentence that does that. So we can cross out A. B basically says to present a specific example that illustrates the study's findings. So it has two parts, a specific example and then illustrate the study's findings. We can say hey, findings, isn't that the third? Isn't that presenting the findings is kind of the third sentence? So that's one hey, red flag maybe, but also a specific example. This isn't really an example, it's more of a procedure. So I would mark this as incorrect. And then C is to explain part of the methodology used in the team study. So this is methodology basically means method or procedure, which is very similar to it really describes the data and how is the data carried out, like the procedure. So I like C. They are showing their process essentially. So I think this could be a possible one. And then D says to call out a challenge the team faced in conducting its analysis. I don't really see any challenge or kind of hardship that the experiment faced. So I would say this isn't correct, and I would mark this wrong and select C as my answer and then move on.